The stagecoach rattled into Tucson, Arizona territory, on a scorching June afternoon in 1878, carrying only 2 passengers and a woman whose hands wouldn't stop shaking. Willow Sanders pressed her palms against her dusty skirts, trying to still the tremors that had plagued her since leaving St. Louis 3 weeks prior, knowing that somewhere in this sun-baked frontier town waited the position that might save her from complete destitution. The advertisement had been simple enough. Housekeeper wanted for working ranch outside Tucson. Room and board provided, must be hardworking and honest. She had both qualities in abundance, though precious little else remained after her husband's death had revealed debts she hadn't known existed. The creditors had taken everything, down to her grandmother's wedding ring, leaving her with 2 trunk loads of clothing, and the bitter knowledge that Gerald had gambled away their future while she'd believed they were building a life together. Tucson sprawled before her in shades of brown and amber, adobe buildings squatting low against the desert landscape like they were trying to avoid the sun's notice. The main street bustled with activity despite the heat. Cowboys herded cattle through the dusty thoroughfare, their shouts mingling with the ring of a blacksmith's hammer. Women in calico dresses hurried between the general store and the butcher's shop, parasols raised against the relentless sun. A dog barked somewhere, and piano music drifted from one of the saloons already doing brisk business, though the day hadn't yet surrendered to evening. Willow climbed down from the stage, accepting the driver's weathered hand with a murmured thanks. Her legs wobbled slightly after the long journey, and the heat hit her like a physical force. St. Louis had been warm, but this was something altogether different. The air itself seemed to shimmer, distorting the distant mountains into wavering mirages. "Miss Sanders." A young man approached, removing his hat to reveal sun-bleached hair and a face full of freckles. He couldn't have been more than 19, with an earnest expression that reminded her of her younger brother before the war had taken him. "I'm Tommy Garcia. Mr. Xavier sent me to fetch you to the ranch." "Thank you." Willow managed a smile, grateful that her new employer had at least sent someone to meet her. She'd half feared she would arrive to find the position already filled or, worse, non-existent. "I appreciate you making the trip into town." Tommy hefted her trunks with ease, loading them into a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 patient horses. "It's no trouble at all, madam. The ranch is about an hour's ride. Mr. Xavier has been looking forward to your arrival. The house has been needing a woman's touch since his mother passed 2 years back." The wagon rolled out of Tucson, following a well-worn trail that cut through scrubland dotted with mesquite and prickly pear cactus. Willow tried to focus on the landscape rather than her nervous anticipation. She'd only exchanged letters with Xavier Garrett, the rancher who had hired her. His correspondence had been brief but courteous, outlining her duties and the wages he would pay. $30 a month, which seemed generous for housekeeping work, plus room and board. It wouldn't make her rich, but it would give her independence and dignity. 2 things she'd learned were worth more than gold. "What's Mr. Garrett like?" she asked Tommy as the wagon bounced over a particularly rough patch of ground. Tommy's face lit up. "He's the finest man in the territory, if you ask me. Fair and honest, treats his workers right, pays on time. He works harder than anyone, up before dawn and often the last to bed. He's built the ranch into something real successful. Folks around here respect him." "Is he married?" Willow asked, then felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the sun. "I only ask because I want to know if there will be a lady of the house I should report to." "No, madam, he's not married. Never has been, though it's not for lack of women trying." Tommy grinned. "Half the unmarried ladies in Tucson have set their caps for him at one time or another. He's always polite, but he never seems interested. Says the ranch keeps him too busy for courting." They crested a rise, and Tommy pointed ahead with obvious pride. "There it is, the Garrett Ranch." Willow's breath caught. She'd expected something modest, perhaps a simple homestead with a few outbuildings. Instead, she saw a sprawling operation that spoke of years of hard work and careful planning. The main house was a long, low adobe structure with a covered porch running its entire length. Cottonwood trees had been planted around it, providing shade and a touch of green in the brown landscape. Beyond the house stood a large barn, several corrals filled with horses, and various other structures she couldn't immediately identify. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, dark shapes against the golden grass. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Mr. Xavier built most of it himself," Tommy said. "When he came here 10 years ago, there was nothing but an old line shack and a dream. Now look at it." As the wagon approached the main house, a man emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his pants. Even from a distance, Willow could see he was tall, with broad shoulders and the easy, confident stride of someone completely comfortable in his surroundings. He wore a simple cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing tanned forearms, and a battered hat that had seen better days. Xavier Garrett looked nothing like Gerald. Her late husband had been of medium height, with soft hands and a softer middle, a city man through and through. Xavier was all lean muscle and sun-bronzed skin, moving with the grace of someone who spent his days in the saddle. As he drew closer, she could make out more details. He was perhaps 30, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes so blue they were startling against his tanned face. A few days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw, and when he smiled up at her, deep lines crinkled at the corners of his eyes. "Miss Sanders, welcome." His voice was deep and warm, with a slight drawl that softened his words. He reached up to help her down from the wagon, his hands strong and steady at her waist. "I hope the journey wasn't too difficult." "It was long but uneventful, Mr. Garrett." Willow stepped down, acutely aware of how dusty and disheveled she must look after 3 weeks of travel. "Thank you for sending Tommy to meet me. Please call me Xavier. We're not formal out here." He released her and stepped back, his eyes kind as they took in her travel-worn appearance. "You must be exhausted. Let me show you to your quarters and you can rest before dinner." He lifted her trunks as easily as Tommy had, carrying them toward the house. Willow followed, her eyes taking in everything. The porch held several chairs and a bench swing, well used and comfortable looking. Pots of herbs grew near the door, their fragrance sweet in the hot air. The door itself was solid wood, sanded smooth and fitted with good hinges. Inside, the house was cooler, the thick adobe walls keeping out the worst of the heat. The main room was large and open, with a stone fireplace at one end and a dining table that could seat a dozen people. Furniture was sparse but well made, and everything was clean, though the room had that indefinable bachelor quality of being functional rather than homely. "Your room is back here." Xavier led her down a short hallway to a door on the left. He pushed it open, revealing a generous space with a real bed, a wardrobe, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. "It's not fancy, but it's private and comfortable." "It's wonderful," Willow said honestly. The room was larger and better appointed than the cramped boarding house room she'd occupied in St. Louis. "Thank you." Xavier set down her trunks and moved toward the door. "I'll let you get settled. Dinner is usually around 7. The cookhouse is out back where the hands eat, but I thought maybe you'd prefer to dine in the main house, at least for tonight. We can discuss your duties and anything else you need to know." After he left, Willow sank onto the bed, suddenly overwhelmed. The mattress was softer than she'd expected, stuffed with something more forgiving than straw. Through the window, she could see the mountains in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer heat. Everything about this place was foreign to her. From the landscape to the climate to the casual way, Xavier Garrett had smiled at her, as if genuinely pleased by her arrival. She unpacked methodically, hanging her dresses in the wardrobe and arranging her few personal items on the washstand. Most of her belongings were practical, designed for work rather than show. Gerald's debts had taught her the folly of valuing appearance over substance. When everything was put away, she poured water from the pitcher and washed the dust from her face and hands, tidying her dark blonde hair as best she could. At 7 o'clock precisely, she emerged from her room to find Xavier setting dishes on the dining table. He'd cleaned up as well, his hair damp and his jaw freshly shaved. He'd changed into a clean shirt, and she noticed he'd made an effort, which touched her more than it probably should have. "I'm not much of a cook," he admitted with a self-deprecating grin. "But I can manage beef and beans without poisoning anyone. The hands eat better than I do, truth be told. Our cook, Maria, she's excellent, but I didn't want to overwhelm you on your first night." They sat across from each other at the large table, and Willow found herself relaxing despite her nervousness. Xavier had an easy manner that put her at ease. He asked about her journey, about St. Louis, about her impressions of Arizona territory. His questions were polite but genuinely interested, and he listened to her answers with his full attention. "I should explain what I'm hoping you can do here," Xavier said as they ate. "The house needs regular cleaning and upkeep. I'd like someone to manage the household accounts, make sure we're adequately supplied. If you're willing, I'd appreciate help with correspondence. I'm not much for letter writing, and I sometimes neglect important business because of it. During roundup and busy seasons, you might need to help feed the hands, though Maria usually manages that." "Does that sound acceptable?" "More than acceptable," Willow assured him. "I kept house for my husband, and I managed his accounts as well. I'm comfortable with figures and correspondence." "Your letter said you were widowed." Xavier's voice was gentle. "I'm sorry for your loss, thank you." Willow chose her words carefully. She'd learned that the truth about Gerald's gambling and debts invited either pity or judgment, neither of which she wanted. "He passed 8 months ago. There were debts I didn't know about. Settling them left me with little choice but to find employment." Xavier nodded, asking nothing more, and she was grateful for his restraint. They talked of other things as they finished dinner. He told her about the ranch, about the cattle he raised and the horses he was beginning to breed. His passion for the work was evident in every word, and Willow found herself drawn in by his enthusiasm. "I came here with almost nothing," Xavier said, leaning back in his chair. "My father died when I was young, and my mother remarried a man who made it clear I wasn't welcome. When I was 18, I left Virginia with a horse, a saddle, and determination. Worked on ranches throughout Texas and New Mexico, learning everything I could. When I was 20, I came to Arizona territory and found this land. Spent everything I had on the property and a few head of cattle. It's taken 10 years of work, but I've built something I'm proud of." "You should be," Willow said. "From what I've seen, it's impressive." "It's lonely sometimes," Xavier admitted, then seemed surprised he'd said it aloud. "I don't mean to complain. I have good men working for me and I'm friendly enough with folks in town. But running a ranch this size doesn't leave much time for a social life." Willow understood loneliness. She'd felt it acutely in her marriage, discovering too late that she and Gerald had little in common beyond their wedding vows. "I imagine it takes all your time and energy." "It does, but it's worth it." Xavier stood and began clearing the dishes. "You must be exhausted. I'll clean up here." Tomorrow, you can start getting familiar with the house and how things run. No need to jump in all at once." That night, lying in her new bed with the window open to catch the cooler evening air, Willow listened to unfamiliar sounds: cattle lowing in the distance, an owl hooting somewhere close by, the rustle of wind through the cottonwood trees. It was nothing like the city sounds she'd grown accustomed to, but she found she didn't mind. There was something peaceful about it, something that eased the constant tension she'd carried since Gerald's death. The next few days passed in a blur of activity as Willow learned the rhythms of the ranch. She woke early, drawn by the sounds of men and horses as the hands began their daily work. Xavier was always up before her, usually already out checking on something by the time she emerged from her room. She threw herself into organizing the household, discovering that while Xavier kept things clean, there was no real system to anything. She found account books in disarray and set about organizing them, creating a clear picture of the ranch's finances. Xavier was more successful than she'd realized. The ranch turned a solid profit, but money was immediately reinvested in stock and improvements. She reorganized the pantry, made lists of needed supplies, and began a regular cleaning schedule for the house. Xavier was appreciative of her efforts without being effusive, thanking her for specific things she did rather than offering vague praise. She found she liked working for him. He was fair and reasonable, never asking for anything unreasonable, and he treated her with respect. The ranch hands were equally courteous, tipping their hats when they saw her and thanking her when she brought water or coffee out to them during the hot afternoons. 2 weeks after her arrival, Xavier invited her to ride out with him to see more of the ranch. "You've been cooped up in the house," he said over breakfast. "I thought you might like to see the property. That is, if you ride. I do, though I haven't in some time." Willow felt a flutter of excitement at the prospect. She'd loved riding as a girl, but Gerald had considered it unladylike and had forbidden it. Xavier provided her with a gentle mare named Daisy, patiently adjusting the stirrups and making sure Willow was comfortable before mounting his own horse, a striking bay gelding named Scout. They rode out across the ranch, Xavier pointing out various landmarks and explaining his operation. He had over 1,000 head of cattle grazing across several thousand acres, with plans to expand further. "The key is water," he explained as they paused on a ridge overlooking a creek. "This runs year-round, fed by springs in the mountains. That's why I chose this land. Without reliable water, ranching in Arizona territory is just a gamble." Willow watched him as he talked, noting the way his eyes scanned the horizon constantly, taking in every detail of his domain. He sat his horse with unconscious ease, completely at home in the saddle. There was something very appealing about his competence, his quiet confidence. "You ever miss Virginia?" she asked. Xavier considered the question. "I miss what I imagined Virginia could have been, but not what it actually was. My stepfather made sure I knew I didn't belong. Coming west gave me the chance to build something of my own, to be my own man. I'll never regret that." They rode further, and Xavier showed her a valley where he planned to build another line shack for hands working the far reaches of the property. He pointed out the different grasses, explaining which were best for cattle, which indicated water nearby. His knowledge was encyclopedic, earned through years of hard experience. As they started back toward the ranch house, a sudden summer storm rolled in with startling speed. One moment the sky was clear, the next it was dark with roiling clouds. Thunder cracked, and rain began to fall in heavy drops that quickly became a downpour. "There's an old line shack just over that rise," Xavier shouted over the rain. "We can wait it out there." They rode hard, the horses sensing their urgency. The line shack appeared, a small adobe structure with a sagging porch. Xavier helped Willow down and ushered both horses under the porch's overhang before pushing open the door. Inside was dim and dusty but dry. A single room with a fireplace, a rough table, and a narrow bed covered in a dusty blanket. Rain drummed on the roof and lightning flashed through the single window. "Are you all right?" Xavier asked, turning to look at her. Willow realized she was soaked through, her dress clinging to her, her hair hanging in wet ropes. She must have looked a sight, but she found herself laughing. "I'm fine, just very wet." Xavier smiled, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. He was wet too, his shirt plastered to his chest, water dripping from his hair. They stood there for a moment, the air between them suddenly charged with more than just the storm's electricity. "Willow," Xavier said, his voice rough. Then he seemed to catch himself. "I should see if there's anything dry we can use. You're shivering." He busied himself checking the storage trunk in the corner, finding an old but clean blanket. "Here, wrap this around yourself. I'll see if I can get a fire going." The fire caught quickly, and soon warm light filled the small space. Willow sat on the floor near the hearth, the blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching as Xavier moved about the cabin. He was careful to maintain a respectful distance, but she was acutely aware of him in the small space. "Xavier," she said quietly, "can I ask you something personal?" He settled across from her, feeding a stick to the fire. "Of course. Tommy said women in town have tried to court you. Why haven't you married?" Xavier was quiet for a long moment. "I suppose I never found the right person. This ranch, it's my dream, my purpose. I couldn't ask someone to share this life unless they truly wanted it, unless they understood what it means. Most of the women I've met, they see the ranch and think it's romantic, but the reality is hard work and isolation. I'd rather be alone than with someone who would grow to resent this place. And you think everyone would eventually resent it? I don't know." Xavier looked at her, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "Maybe I just haven't met someone who sees it the way I do." The rain continued for over an hour, and they talked the whole time. Xavier told her about his mother, who had died of pneumonia 2 years prior, about how much he'd loved her and how hard it had been to watch her decline. Willow found herself sharing more about her marriage than she'd intended, about the loneliness of living with someone who was essentially a stranger, about the shock of discovering Gerald's gambling. "I thought I was broken somehow," she admitted. "That I'd failed as a wife because I couldn't make him happy." "That's not on you," Xavier said firmly. "A man who gambles away his family's security, who lies to his wife, that's his failing, not yours." Something in his certainty soothed an ache she hadn't fully acknowledged. They fell silent, listening to the rain, and Willow felt a strange contentment despite the odd circumstances. When the storm finally passed, they rode back to the ranch as the sun broke through the clouds, turning the wet landscape into something magical. Everything sparkled, and the air smelled of creosote and damp earth. Willow felt something shift inside her, like a door opening onto possibilities she'd thought were closed forever. Over the following weeks, Willow settled fully into life at the ranch. Her days developed a comfortable rhythm. She woke early, prepared breakfast, managed the household accounts, and tackled whatever cleaning or organizing needed doing. In the afternoons, when the heat was most intense, she often sat on the porch with correspondence or mending, watching the ranch hands go about their work. Xavier joined her for meals, and these became the highlight of her day. Their conversations ranged widely, from books they'd read to politics to dreams for the future. Xavier was well-read despite his limited formal education, with opinions he could defend thoughtfully. He made her laugh with stories about ranch life and listened intently when she talked about her own experiences and thoughts. She realized she was falling for him on a Tuesday in late July. She was hanging laundry, and she heard his laugh from somewhere near the barn. The sound made her heart lift in a way that had nothing to do with employer and employee. When he came in for lunch, dusty and sweaty from breaking a new horse, she found herself noticing the strength in his hands, the easy way he moved, the kindness in his eyes when he thanked her for the meal. It terrified her. She'd sworn after Gerald's death that she was done with men, done with the vulnerability of caring. But Xavier was nothing like Gerald. He was honest and hardworking, gentle and strong in equal measure. Being near him felt like coming home. The problem was that she had no idea how he felt. He was unfailingly kind and respectful, but he maintained a careful distance. He never touched her unless necessary, never said anything that could be construed as improper. She told herself it was better this way, that nothing could come of her feelings anyway. One evening in early August, as they sat on the porch after dinner watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Xavier turned to her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Willow, can I ask you something?" "Of course. You plan to stay here. I mean long term." He looked uncharacteristically uncertain. "You're the best housekeeper I've ever had, and I'd hate to lose you, but I know this is isolated and the work is demanding. If you're thinking of moving on, I'd understand." "I have no plans to leave," Willow said carefully. "Unless you're dissatisfied with my work. God, no, you're amazing. The house has never been better organized, and having someone to help with the accounts and correspondence has freed up so much of my time. I just wanted to make sure you were happy here." "I am," she said honestly. "Happier than I've been in a long time." Xavier smiled, relief evident in his expression. "Good. That's good." They sat in companionable silence, watching as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Willow wanted to say more, to tell him that her happiness had as much to do with him as with the place, but she kept silent. Some things were too risky to voice aloud. August melted into September, and the terrible heat began to ease slightly. The ranch prepared for the fall roundup, when they would gather the cattle scattered across the range, brand the calves, and select which steers would be driven to market. Xavier explained that it would be their busiest time, with extra hands hired on and everyone working from dawn to well past dark. "I'll need to be out with the men most of the time," he told her. "Maria will handle feeding everyone. I just wanted you to know I won't be around much for a few weeks." Willow missed him immediately. She saw him only briefly, usually early in the morning or late at night, and always he looked exhausted. She took to leaving coffee and something to eat on the table for him, knowing he often forgot to feed himself when he was working hard. Sometimes she heard him come in late, moving quietly so as not to wake her, and she would listen to the sound of him settling in for a few short hours of sleep before starting again. One night, she woke to the sound of something crashing in the kitchen. Heart pounding, she grabbed a shawl and hurried out to find Xavier standing in the middle of the room, holding a broken plate and looking utterly defeated. "I'm sorry," he said wearily. "I didn't mean to wake you. I dropped the plate." In the lamplight, she could see how exhausted he was. His face was drawn, his eyes shadowed with fatigue. He swayed slightly where he stood. "Xavier, when did you last sleep properly?" she asked, taking the broken pieces from his hands and setting them aside. "I don't know. Few days ago." He ran a hand through his hair. "There's just so much to do, and we're short-handed. 2 of the men came down with something, and we're behind schedule." "You're going to make yourself sick," Willow said firmly. "Sit down. I'll make you something to eat, and then you're going to sleep." "I can't. I need to be out before dawn, and there are accounts I need to review, and I have to write to the buyer in Tucson about the delivery schedule." "I'll handle the accounts and the letter," Willow said. You've taught me enough about the operation that I know what needs to be said. And you can go out at dawn, but not before you've had at least 5 or 6 hours of sleep. You're no good to anyone if you collapse." Xavier looked like he wanted to argue, but he was too tired. He sat at the table, shoulders slumping, while Willow quickly prepared eggs and toast. She set the plate in front of him and poured coffee, then sat across from him. "Eat," she ordered gently. He obeyed, and she saw some of the tension leave his frame as food hit his empty stomach. When he finished, she took the plate and pointed toward his room. "Sleep. I'll wake you before dawn." "Thank you, Willow." He stood, then hesitated. "I don't know what I'd do without you." He was gone before she could respond, but his words warmed her as she cleaned up the broken plate and then settled at his desk to tackle the accounts and correspondence. She worked by lamplight, finding the information she needed in his neat but scattered notes. The letter to the buyer was straightforward, confirming the number of head and the delivery date. The accounts took longer, but she had a head for figures and enjoyed bringing order to the numbers. She woke him as promised, well before dawn, and had coffee and breakfast ready. Xavier looked better, the worst of the exhaustion eased, though he was still clearly tired. "The letter is there," she said, pointing to the envelope on the table. "The accounts are updated and balanced. Everything looks good financially." Xavier picked up the letter, reading it quickly. "This is perfect. Willow, thank you. I don't know how to repay you." "It's my job," she said, though they both knew she'd gone well beyond her duties. The roundup continued for another 2 weeks, but Xavier began to delegate more, trusting his foreman to handle some of the tasks he'd previously insisted on doing himself. He came home earlier, looking less like a man on the verge of collapse. The work was completed successfully, and the cattle drive to Tucson went off without incident. When it was finally over, Xavier took a full day off, something Willow learned he almost never did. She found him on the porch that evening, feet propped up, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. "Join me," he invited, gesturing to the chair beside him. She sat and they watched the sunset together. After a while, Xavier spoke. "I've been thinking about something, about the future of this ranch." He turned to look at her. "I've built something successful here, but lately I've been wondering what the point is. I mean, I love the work, love this place, but I'm building all this and I have no one to share it with, no one to pass it on to." Willow's heart beat faster, but she kept her voice steady. "You could marry. Have children." "I could," Xavier agreed. "If I could find a woman who truly wanted this life, who saw this place the way I do." He paused. "Someone like you." The words hung in the air between them. Willow hardly dared to breathe. "Willow, I know I'm not the most romantic man. I'm rough around the edges and I spend more time with cattle than people. But these past months, having you here, talking with you, working alongside you, it's been the happiest I've ever been." He turned in his chair to face her fully. "I've fallen in love with you. Completely, irrevocably in love with you. And if there's any chance you might feel the same way, I'd count myself the luckiest man alive." Joy flooded through her, so intense it brought tears to her eyes. "Xavier, I do feel the same way. I've been falling for you since that day we got caught in the rain. I just didn't think you saw me as anything other than your housekeeper." "You've never been just my housekeeper," Xavier said fervently. He stood and pulled her gently to her feet, taking her hands in his. "You're brilliant and strong and beautiful. You make me laugh, you challenge me to think differently, and you understand this place and this life in a way I never expected anyone to. Say you'll let me court you properly. Say you'll give me the chance to prove I can make you happy." "Yes," Willow said, laughing through happy tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." Xavier pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and she felt his heart racing against her cheek. When he pulled back slightly, his eyes searched hers, asking permission. She nodded, and he kissed her softly, reverently, like she was something precious. Over the following weeks, their courtship unfolded with a sweetness that surprised her. Xavier might have claimed he wasn't romantic, but he proved her wrong repeatedly. He brought her wildflowers from the range. He taught her to rope and helped her improve her riding. They took long rides together in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. He kissed her under the stars and told her she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. For her part, Willow discovered what it meant to be truly loved. Xavier made her feel valued for who she was, not what she could provide. He asked her opinion on ranch matters and listened seriously to her suggestions. He supported her interests, bringing her books from town and encouraging her to pursue her love of painting the desert landscapes. In late October, as they sat together watching the moon rise, Xavier took her hand. "Willow, I don't want to rush you, but I also don't want to waste time now that I've found you. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner in all things?" "Yes," Willow said without hesitation. "There's nothing I want more." They were married in November in a simple ceremony at the small church in Tucson. Tommy served as Xavier's best man, and Maria stood up with Willow. The ranch hands all attended, along with several townspeople who had become friendly with Xavier over the years. It was small and intimate, exactly what they both wanted. The wedding night found them alone in the ranch house, suddenly shy with each other despite the months of courtship. Xavier was gentle and patient, and Willow felt cherished in a way she never had before. Afterwards, lying in his arms, she felt a contentment she'd never imagined possible. Over the next few months, Willow settled into her role as Xavier's wife with the same efficiency she'd brought to housekeeping. They worked together seamlessly, partners in every sense. The ranch continued to prosper under their joint management. Willow's organizational skills and head for business complemented Xavier's knowledge of cattle and land management. But there was something weighing on her, a secret she knew she needed to share. Several times she tried to broach the subject, but fear had stopped her words. What if it changed everything? What if he felt deceived? In late February, as they prepared for bed one evening, Xavier noticed her distraction. "What's wrong, love? You've been quiet all day." Willow took a deep breath. It was time. She couldn't keep putting this off. "There's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you before we married, but I was afraid." Xavier's face grew serious, but he took her hands, holding them securely. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together. You can tell me anything. When I was married to Gerald, we tried for years to have children. Nothing ever happened. I saw doctors in St. Louis. They examined me and said I was barren, that I would never be able to conceive." The words came out in a rush. "I know we haven't talked much about children, but I know most men want heirs, want sons to carry on their name and inherit what they've built. I should have told you before we married. I understand if you're angry or disappointed, or if you feel I deceived you." She couldn't look at him, couldn't bear to see disappointment or anger in his eyes. But Xavier gently lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. To her shock, he was smiling. "Willow, sweetheart, why would I be angry about that? Because I can't give you children. I can't give you the family you deserve." Xavier pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "First of all, you haven't deceived me about anything. Second, there are many ways to build a family." He pulled back, his eyes dancing with a joy she didn't understand. "If you can't bear children, then we'll adopt a dozen." Willow stared at him, hardly able to believe what she was hearing. "You would do that? You would adopt children?" "Of course I would. Willow, I didn't fall in love with you because I thought you'd give me heirs. I fell in love with you because you're brilliant and brave and beautiful, because you make me laugh, because I can't imagine my life without you. Children would be a blessing, but they're not the foundation of our marriage. You are. We are." he smiled. And honestly, the idea of adopting appeals to me. There are so many children in this territory who need homes, who need parents to love them. We could give them that. We could give them a home and a future. Tears streamed down Willow's face, but they were tears of relief and joy. You really mean that? I've never meant anything more in my life. Xavier kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Then we'll adopt a dozen. We'll fill this house with children and love and laughter. We'll build a family, Willow, just maybe not in the traditional way. And honestly, I think that makes it even more special. Over the next few weeks, they began to explore the possibility of adoption. Xavier made inquiries in Tucson and wrote letters to orphanages in larger towns. They learned that there were indeed many children in need of homes. Some were orphans, their parents taken by disease or accidents. Others had been abandoned when their parents couldn't afford to care for them. Still others were the children of women who had died in childbirth, with no family to take them in. In April, they received a letter from a church-run orphanage in Phoenix. A woman there, Sister Mary Catherine, wrote that she had 3 children in particular who desperately needed placement. 2 brothers, ages 7 and 5, and their infant sister, just 8 months old. Their parents had died of fever, and the boys were struggling in the orphanage setting. The sister thought they needed the stability and love of a real home. Xavier and Willow looked at each other over the breakfast table as they read the letter. 3 children, Willow said softly. It's a lot to take on all at once. It is, Xavier agreed, but they're siblings. They shouldn't be separated, and we have plenty of room, plenty of resources. What do you think? Willow felt her heart expand with hope and love. I think we should meet them. They made the trip to Phoenix in early May, taking the stage and then staying overnight at a modest hotel. The orphanage was a long, low building on the outskirts of the city, clean but clearly overcrowded. Sister Mary Catherine greeted them warmly, a round woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. The boys are Daniel and Joseph, she explained as she led them through the building. Daniel is the older one, very protective of his siblings. Joseph is quieter, more withdrawn. The baby is Sarah. Sweet, tempered thing, but she needs a mother's care. They've been with us for 3 months now, since their parents died. She led them to a room where the boys were playing quietly with some wooden blocks. They looked up as the adults entered, and Willow's heart clenched at the wariness in their eyes. These were children who had learned not to hope too much. Daniel was tall for 7, with dark hair and serious brown eyes. Joseph was smaller, with lighter coloring and a delicate build. Both were neat and clean, but their clothes were worn and too small. Daniel, Joseph, these are Mr. and Mrs. Garrett, Sister Mary Catherine said gently. They've come from Tucson to meet you. Xavier knelt down, bringing himself to the boys' level. Hello, boys. I hear you're pretty good at building things with those blocks. Daniel studied him carefully. They're just blocks. Well, even so, you know I build things too. I have a ranch down near Tucson. I raise cattle and horses, and I'm always building something. New corrals, new outbuildings. Could always use help from fellows who know their way around building. Xavier's voice was gentle, non-threatening. Joseph sidled closer to his brother but said nothing. Willow sat on the floor near them, not crowding them. Sister Mary Catherine tells me you have a baby sister. Is she here too? Daniel nodded. Sarah, she's with the babies. Would you like to see her? The sister asked. The boys nodded eagerly, and they all moved to the nursery where several infants were in cradles tended by a young woman. Sarah was easy to spot. She had the same dark hair as Daniel and was watching the mobile above her crib with intense focus. When she saw the boys, her face lit up with a gummy smile. Hello, Sarah, Willow said softly, and the baby turned to look at her with curious eyes. Aren't you beautiful? They spent an hour at the orphanage, talking with the boys and playing with Sarah. Daniel gradually opened up, telling them about his parents, about the farm they'd had, about how he tried to take care of Joseph and Sarah when their parents got sick. Joseph remained quiet, but Willow noticed he stayed close, listening to everything. On the way back to the hotel, Xavier took Willow's hand. "What do you think?" "I think those children need us," Willow said. "And I think we need them. If you're willing, I'd like to bring them home." "I was hoping you'd say that." Xavier smiled. "Let's go back tomorrow and start the paperwork." The process took several weeks, requiring letters of recommendation and inspections of the ranch. But in late June, Xavier and Willow returned to Phoenix with a wagon and brought Daniel, Joseph, and Sarah home to the ranch. The transition wasn't easy. Daniel was protective to the point of being aggressive at times, not trusting that these new adults would truly care for them. Joseph had nightmares that left him screaming in the night. Sarah needed constant care and attention. But Xavier and Willow faced each challenge with patience and love. Xavier spent hours with the boys, teaching them about the ranch, letting them help with age-appropriate tasks. He showed them how to care for the horses, how to mend fences, how to rope. He was patient with their mistakes and generous with his praise. Slowly, Daniel began to trust, his rigid shoulders relaxing, his rare smiles becoming more frequent. Willow devoted herself to making the children feel secure and loved. She held Sarah for hours, rocking her and singing to her. She helped Joseph work through his fears, sitting with him on the hard nights, assuring him that he was safe. She read to the boys every evening, introduced them to painting and drawing, helped them with their letters and numbers. One evening in late July, about a month after the children had arrived, Willow was putting them to bed. She'd tucked Joseph in and was checking on Daniel when the boy spoke quietly. "Are you and Mr. Xavier going to keep us, or are we just here for a while?" Willow sat on the edge of his bed, her heart breaking at the fear in his question. "Daniel, you are our son now, you and Joseph and Sarah. This is your home for always. We're your family. Promise." His voice was small, younger than his 7 years. "I promise." Willow leaned down and kissed his forehead. "We love you, all three of you. You're not going anywhere." Daniel's arms came around her neck in a fierce hug. "I love you too, Mama." It was the first time he'd called her that, and Willow felt tears streaming down her face as she held him close. "I love you so much, sweetheart." Xavier was waiting in their bedroom when she finally left the boys' room. She went straight into his arms, crying happy tears against his chest. "He called me Mama," she said. "Daniel called me Mama." Xavier held her tight and she felt his own tears against her hair. "We're a family now," he said. "A real family." As the months passed, the children settled more fully into their new life. Daniel thrived under Xavier's patient mentorship, showing a natural aptitude for ranching. Joseph proved to have a gentle way with the animals, particularly the horses. He spent hours in the barn, grooming and talking to them, and the horses responded to his quiet presence. Sarah grew from infant to toddler, her first steps celebrated by the entire household, her first words bringing joy to everyone. In the spring of the following year, Xavier and Willow received another letter from Sister Mary Catherine. "There was a girl," she wrote, "about 9 years old, whose mother had died. Her father was a drunk who had abandoned her at the orphanage. She was bright and capable but struggling with anger at her circumstances. Her name is Elizabeth," Xavier read aloud. "The sister thinks she needs a stable home with patience and structure." Willow and Xavier looked at each other. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think our family has room for one more," Xavier said. "If you're willing." They brought Elizabeth home in May. She was a thin, sharp-featured girl with red hair and green eyes that held too much hurt for someone so young. She was suspicious of their kindness, testing them at every turn. She was rude to Willow, defiant with Xavier, and mean to the younger children. But Xavier and Willow had learned patience through the other children. They set clear boundaries, enforced them consistently, and met Elizabeth's anger with steady love. Slowly, very slowly, the girls' walls began to crack. The breakthrough came one evening when Elizabeth was helping Willow prepare dinner. She was chopping vegetables with more force than necessary when the knife slipped, cutting her finger. She yelped, then immediately tried to hide the injury, clearly expecting punishment for carelessness. "Let me see," Willow said gently, taking the girl's hand. The cut wasn't deep but was bleeding. She cleaned and bandaged it carefully. "There, you'll be fine, just be more careful, all right." Elizabeth stared at her. "You're not mad. It was an accident, sweetheart. Accidents happen. I'm just glad you're not seriously hurt." Elizabeth's composure crumbled. She burst into tears and Willow gathered her close, letting her cry. "I'm sorry," Elizabeth sobbed. "I'm sorry I've been so mean. I just thought if I was bad enough, you'd send me back and then it wouldn't hurt so much when you decided you didn't want me anymore." "Oh, honey." Willow held her tight. "We are never sending you back. You are our daughter for better or worse, in good times and bad. Nothing you do will make us stop loving you. Do you understand?" From that day on, Elizabeth was a different child. The anger didn't disappear overnight, but it lessened. She began to help more willingly, to show affection to her younger siblings, to seek out Willow and Xavier for comfort and guidance. She proved to be wickedly intelligent, devouring every book Xavier brought home from town. By the time Elizabeth had been with them for 6 months, the ranch house rang with the sounds of childhood. 4 children running and playing, laughing and sometimes fighting, but always surrounded by love. Xavier and Willow would sometimes sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the children play in the yard, marveling at how their lives had changed. "Do you remember what you said that night?" Willow asked one evening. "When I told you I was barren." "I said we'd adopt a dozen," Xavier recalled, smiling. "Though I'll admit 4 is keeping us plenty busy." "It is," Willow agreed. "But Xavier, I was thinking, there's so much need out there, so many children without homes. We have the resources, we have the love, we have the space." Xavier looked at her, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You want to adopt more?" "Not right away," Willow said. "The children we have need time to fully settle. But in the future, if the opportunity arose, if there were children who needed us, I'd like to think we'd be open to it." Xavier pulled her close, kissing her temple. "I married the most amazing woman in the world. Yes, love, if there are children who need us, we'll make room." The years that followed were busy and chaotic and wonderful. 2 years after Elizabeth joined them, they adopted twin boys, Matthew and Marcus, age 6, whose parents had died in a wagon accident. The following year, they took in a newborn whose mother had died in childbirth, a tiny girl they named Grace. A year after that, they adopted 10-year-old Thomas, who had been orphaned when Apache raiders killed his family. Each child brought their own challenges and their own joys. Each required patience and love and commitment. But Xavier and Willow rose to meet every challenge, supported by their growing family. The older children helped care for the younger ones, creating bonds of sibling love that were as strong as any blood tie. Xavier expanded the ranch house, adding on rooms to accommodate their growing family. He hired additional help, both for the ranch work and the household, recognizing that Willow couldn't manage everything alone. Maria became a permanent fixture, helping with cooking and cleaning and child minding. Tommy married and built a house on the ranch property, his own children becoming playmates for the Garrett children. The ranch itself continued to prosper. Xavier's reputation for fair dealing and quality cattle spread throughout the territory. He was elected to the territorial legislature, where he advocated for better schools and orphan care. Willow became involved in charitable work in Tucson, organizing fundraisers for the orphanages and schools. One evening, when they'd been married for 8 years, Willow sat on the porch with Xavier, watching their children play in the yard. Daniel was 16 now, nearly a man, working full-time on the ranch. Elizabeth was 15, beautiful and brilliant, planning to become a teacher. Joseph was 13, quiet but happy, with a special gift for training horses. The younger children ranged from 11 down to infant Grace, toddling around the yard under the watchful eyes of her older siblings. "We did it," Xavier said softly, taking Willow's hand. "We adopted a dozen." "Well, 8, but that's close enough," Willow laughed. "We did indeed, though you know there's still room for a few more if the right situation came along." Xavier pulled her close. "I love you, Willow Garrett. You've given me more than I ever dreamed of. A family, a home, a purpose beyond just building a ranch. You've made my life complete." "You've done the same for me," Willow said, her heart full to bursting. "That day I arrived in Tucson, I thought I was coming to be a housekeeper, to have a job and nothing more. I never imagined I'd find love, find a family, find a whole life." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the Arizona sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Daniel was teaching Marcus to rope, his patience with his younger brother evident. Elizabeth had Grace on her hip, pointing out birds to the delighted toddler. Joseph and Matthew were grooming horses at the corral, working in that companionable quiet they both favored. Thomas was reading under a tree, though he looked up regularly to check on the younger children. This was what a family looked like, Willow thought. Not blood ties, though those were fine too, but love ties. Bonds forged through choice and commitment, through patience and perseverance, through showing up day after day and choosing to love even when it was hard. "You ever regret it?" Xavier asked quietly. "That we didn't have children of our own blood?" Willow looked at him in genuine surprise. "Never, not once. Xavier, these are our children. Every single one of them. They are ours in every way that matters. I couldn't love them more if I'd borne them myself." "I feel the same way," Xavier said. "I just wanted to make sure you had no regrets." "My only regret is that I wasted so many years thinking I was broken because I couldn't conceive. I'm not broken. I was just meant to mother differently. And honestly, knowing how many children out there need homes, need love, I think this was always meant to be my path." Over the next decade, they would add 3 more children to their family. A pair of siblings, ages 8 and 5, whose parents had been killed in a mining accident. A teenage girl who had been living on the streets of Tucson after running away from an abusive situation. And finally, 1 more infant, another newborn whose mother had died bringing him into the world. 11 children in total. Not quite the dozen Xavier had promised, but close enough. The ranch house was expanded again and again, becoming a sprawling structure that could accommodate the large family. The dinner table seated 20 when everyone was home, including the ranch hands who had become extended family. The children grew and thrived. Daniel took over much of the ranch management, allowing Xavier to step back slightly. Elizabeth became a teacher, opening a school on the ranch property that served not only the Garrett children but also children from nearby ranches. Joseph started a horse breeding program that became renowned throughout the territory. The younger children showed their own talents and interests, each one unique and precious. Grandchildren began to arrive. Daniel married a girl from town and gave them 3 grandchildren. Elizabeth married a lawyer and had 2. Joseph married late but happily, bringing his wife to live on the ranch. The house that had once been quiet and lonely was now constantly full of life and noise and love. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Xavier surprised Willow with a trip to San Francisco, leaving the ranch in Daniel's capable hands. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate in fancy restaurants, and walked along the waterfront hand in hand like newlyweds. 20 years, Xavier marveled as they watched the sun set over the Pacific. Sometimes it feels like just yesterday you stepped off that stage in Tucson, and sometimes it feels like we've been together forever. Both are true, Willow said, leaning into his embrace. I can remember every detail of that first day, how nervous I was, how kind you were. And at the same time, I can barely remember what my life was like before you. Do you remember what you were most afraid of? Xavier asked. When you first told me you couldn't have children. I was afraid you wouldn't want me anymore, Willow admitted. I was afraid I'd lose you. Instead, we built something extraordinary together. Xavier turned her to face him. Willow, you are the love of my life, my partner in all things, the best decision I ever made. Our family, our life, everything we've built together, it's more than I ever imagined possible. And it all started because you had the courage to tell me the truth, and I had the wisdom to see that there are many ways to build a family. Willow kissed him there on the San Francisco waterfront, tasting salt air and 20 years of love. Then we'll adopt a dozen. Best words you ever said to me. Second best, Xavier corrected, smiling. The best was when I said I love you. They returned to Arizona territory and to their ranch, which had become something of a legend. The Garrett Ranch was known not just for its cattle and horses, but for its heart. Travelers knew they could always find a meal and a place to sleep. Families in crisis knew they could turn to Xavier and Willow for help. Children without homes knew there might be room for them in the sprawling house full of love. Xavier and Willow grew older together, their hair silvering, their faces lining with the marks of years of sun and laughter. But their love never dimmed. If anything, it deepened, rooted in shared experiences and mutual respect, watered by daily choice and commitment. On a warm spring evening in 1908, 30 years after Willow had first arrived in Tucson, they sat on the porch of the ranch house watching the sun set. They were grandparents many times over now, and their children and grandchildren filled the house to bursting during holidays and celebrations. The ranch was thriving under Daniel's management, though Xavier still went out most days, unable to fully retire from the work he loved. You know what I was thinking about today, Willow said, her hand secure in Xavier's. That doctor in St. Louis who told me I was barren. I wonder what he would think if he could see us now. 11 children, 17 grandchildren, and still going strong. Xavier laughed. I think he'd be amazed. I know I am. Every single day I'm amazed by what we've built, by the family we've created. We had help, Willow said. We didn't do it alone. No, Xavier agreed, but we started it. We chose love over convention, family over blood ties, possibility over limitation. That was us, love. That was our choice. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Daniel emerged from the house, his own children trailing behind him. Papa, Mama, we're heading home, he said, using the names that had never changed despite his grown status. But we'll be back Sunday for dinner, as always. We'll be here, Xavier assured him. They watched as their children and grandchildren climbed into wagons and rode off toward their own homes scattered across the ranch property. Lights began to appear in windows across the land, each one representing a family, a home, a piece of the legacy Xavier and Willow had built together. Do you remember what you told me that first night at dinner? Willow asked. You said the ranch was lonely sometimes. It was, Xavier said. Before you came, I had success and comfort, but I was lonely. I didn't fully realize it until you arrived and I understood what I'd been missing." "It's not lonely anymore," Willow said, gesturing at the lights scattered across the ranch, at the house full of memories behind them, at the life they'd built together. "No," Xavier agreed, pulling her close. "It's full. Full of life and love and family. Full of everything that matters." They sat together as the night deepened. Two people who had found each other against the odds, who had built a family in the most unexpected way, who had turned a moment of vulnerability into a lifetime of love. The barrenness Willow had feared would define her had instead become the foundation for something extraordinary. Unable to create life in the traditional way, they had instead saved lives, giving home and hope to children who had neither. The ranch would continue for generations, passed down through the children they had chosen and who had chosen them in return. But the real legacy wasn't the land or the cattle or the buildings. The real legacy was love, the kind of love that sees beyond limitations to possibilities. The kind of love that builds families from fragments. The kind of love that says, "Then we'll adopt a dozen," and means it with every fiber of its being. As they finally rose and went inside, the ranch house welcomed them with warm light and the lingering sense of dinner. Photos lined the walls, documenting 30 years of family. Children at various ages, weddings, births, celebrations. Each photo told a story of love chosen and sustained, of commitment honored, of promises kept. Xavier and Willow prepared for bed with the easy familiarity of 3 decades together. As they settled under the quilts Willow had made over the years, each one telling its own story in fabric and thread, Xavier pulled her close. "I love you, Willow Garrett," he said, as he had said thousands of times before. "I love you too, Xavier," she replied, her head resting on his shoulder. "Thank you for seeing me, for loving me, for building this beautiful life with me." "Thank you for having the courage to tell me the truth," Xavier said, "for trusting me with your pain and your fear, for saying yes when I asked you to marry me, for every day since then." They fell asleep as they had for 30 years, wrapped in each other's arms, secure in their love and the life they had built together. Outside, the Arizona night settled over the ranch, peaceful and vast. Cattle lowed in the distance. An owl hooted from the cottonwood tree. The creek ran its eternal course toward the distant river. And inside the ranch house, in bedrooms scattered throughout the sprawling structure, children and grandchildren slept, each one a testament to the power of love to transform lives, to build families, to create hope from despair. Each one living proof that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice and commitment, about showing up day after day, about loving through the hard times and celebrating the good ones. Each one a reminder that sometimes the things we think make us broken are actually what make us whole if we're brave enough to trust, wise enough to see possibility, and blessed enough to find someone who looks at our limitations and says, with a smile full of love and promise, "Then we'll adopt a dozen." And they had. Not exactly 12, but 11 beautiful souls who had needed them as much as they'd needed those children. 11 lives transformed, 11 futures secured, 11 hearts given a home. And from those 11 had come grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a whole dynasty built not on blood but on love. The Garrett Ranch stood as a beacon in Arizona territory and beyond, proof that families come in all forms, that love multiplies when shared, that the greatest legacy isn't what you build with your hands but what you nurture in your heart. Xavier and Willow had built an empire of love, and it would endure long after they were gone, carried forward by children who knew without doubt that they were chosen, wanted, and cherished. As dawn broke over the ranch the next morning, Xavier and Willow rose to begin another day. Their bodies were older now, movements slower, but their hearts were as full as they'd ever been. They had coffee on the porch, watching the ranch come to life. Ranch hands headed out for their day's work. Cattle moved toward fresh grazing. Horses nickered in the corrals, waiting to be fed. And later that morning, a telegram would arrive from Sister Mary Catherine in Phoenix. There was a child, she wrote, just 5 years old, whose parents had died, a little boy who needed a home. Was there any chance, the sister wondered, that the Garretts might have room for one more? Xavier and Willow read the telegram together, then looked at each other and smiled. They were older now, in their 50s, with grandchildren nearly as old as this orphaned boy. But their home had always had room for one more child who needed love. "What do you think?" Xavier asked. "I think our family has room for another," Willow said. "If you're willing." Xavier laughed and pulled her close. "Always willing, love, always." And so their story continued, as it would for many years to come. Written in the lives of children saved and futures secured, in love given and returned, in a family built not by accident of birth, but by deliberate choice of heart. The rancher and his wife, who had turned a moment of painful honesty into a lifetime of beautiful possibility, who had proved that the deepest form of parenthood is not creating life but nurturing it, protecting it, and loving it unconditionally. Their legacy would endure in the land they'd stewarded, in the ranch they'd built, but most of all in the hearts of the children they'd saved and the family they'd created. 12 children, give or take, each one precious, each one loved, each one proof that the greatest miracles aren't the ones we're born with but the ones we choose to create through love, commitment, and an open heart. This was their story. This was their triumph. And as the Arizona sun climbed higher in the endless sky, it shone down on the Garrett Ranch and all who called it home, warming a family built on love's foundation and sustained by love's enduring power. A testament to the truth that sometimes our greatest blessings come not in the form we expect, but in the form we need, if we're only brave enough to say yes.